In this movie, I'm going to share with you some very glad tidings. We now have multiple undos and redos inside the free transform mode. And this applies not only to standard transformations such as scale and rotate, but also to quilt warp. And so I'm going to start things off by switching to the new object selection tool. Notice that the selection mode is set to rectangle up here in the options bar. And then I'll just go ahead and generally marquee this elephant, and I can use the space bar again to move my marquee on the fly. And then I'll just go ahead and select that guy like so, and I'll jump him to a new layer as well as name that layer by pressing Control-Alt-J or Command-Option-J on the Mac. And I'm just going to call this layer Demo and click OK. And then I'll hide the original layer so that we're seeing the elephant against checkerboard transparency. All right, so it's not the best selection in the world, but it'll suffice. And so I'll go up to the Edit menu and choose Free Transform, or you have that standard keyboard shortcut of Control-T here on the PC or Command-T on the Mac. And now notice if I drag a corner handle, I will scale the elephant proportionally. More on that in the next movie, by the way. And now I'll move my cursor slightly outside the transformation boundary in order to rotate the elephant. And now I'll switch to the quilt warp mode by clicking on the warp icon up here in the options bar. And I'll add some custom rows and columns by pressing and holding the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and clicking here and then clicking right about there. And now I'll click off the points to deselect them. I now want to marquee these 4 points. You don't do that by dragging. If you drag, you're going to deform your artwork. We don't want that, so I'll press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac. And then I'll press the Shift key and marquee in order to select those 4 points like so. And notice that everything's at an angle. So Photoshop knows this image has been rotated, even though I'm working with a standard pixel-based layer as opposed to a smart object. All right, now I'll position my cursor at the corner of this rectangle in order to scale the elephant's eye. And then I'll drag this side edge here in order to squish him. And I'll move the cursor outside the rectangle and drag in order to rotate it. And now I'll switch back to the standard free transform mode by clicking on this warp icon once again. So you can switch back and forth as many times as you like. And now I'll apply a conventional 4-point distortion by pressing the Control key or the Command key on the Mac and dragging one of these corner handles like so. And now let's say I don't like what I've done. Now I don't want to abandon everything by pressing the Escape key. I just want to backstep through my various operations. Then I can now press Control-Z or Command-Z multiple times in a row. Now this used to be a toggle. Used to toggle back and forth between undo and redo, and that's because you only had one undo inside the free transform mode. Now you have as many as you like. And so I'll undo those last couple of distortions by pressing Control or Command-Z a couple of times in a row. And then I'll undo part of my quilt warp. Now, in order to see what's going on there, I need to switch to the warp mode. So I'll go ahead and switch back to that mode so I can see what's happening here. And now I'll press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac in order to watch all of my operations undo sequentially. And so again, they would undo anyway, but you wouldn't see what's going on unless you switch back to that warp mode. All right, now I'll press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac to undo the rotation, and I'll press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac to undo the scaling. Now, I can redo as well just by pressing Control-Shift-Z or Command-Shift-Z on the Mac. And every operation that I applied is going to be reperformed as we're seeing right here, whether it's part of the standard conventional free transform mode or whether it's part of quilt warp. And that, my friends, is how you take advantage of multiple undos and redos in the free transform mode, including quilt warp.